Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Greg Theriault.
Okay, and how many years have you been teaching English language arts?
I've been teaching language arts, English language arts, since 1997. So I guess that would be about 18 years.
Okay, and what grade level do you teach currently?
I currently teach grade 6, and that's the level that I've been teaching for the last 18 years.
Okay, and how has your approach to teaching English language arts changed over the years because of the introduction of new technologies?
It's really changed tremendously, really. When I started, we still used Gestetner machines.
And what are Gestetner machines?
Gestetner machines. We used to get something, you know how when you get a receipt, you have this carbon paper that goes...
The skinny paper?
Well, it makes a copy from the first page to the next.
Yes.
So Gestetner machines, first you start with those carbon sheets, and you'd have a white sheet of paper on top of it. You'd write out whatever the activity was, or whatever the questions were, or whatever, by hand. Or if you had the secretary that could do it for you, she might type it for you, or he might type it for you if somebody was doing it. Or you could type it yourself. But mostly people wrote them out by hand, and then you'd use the carbon and you'd put them in these machines called Gestetner machines, and you added alcohol to it, and you would crank it, and it would crank out as many sheets as you wanted to crank, and they would be blue. The sheets were, it was like a blue print, and that was about as high tech as we had when I started. Until
when did they use that? Before photocopiers were released?
I would say photocopiers existed, but I think they were very, very expensive to use at the time because we were restricted to the amount we could use. So if you photocopied everything you needed, you'd run out. So they kept a pretty close eye on how many photocopies you made. So the standard practice at the time, this would have been 1990, 91, practice at the time was to run off these sheets of Gestetner paper. So anyway, and you had these big jugs of isopropyl alcohol that you'd pour into the machines to make them work. And so a lot of times those were stored in the staff room, and people still smoked in the staff rooms too. So you had this isopropyl alcohol and people smoking, so it probably wasn't the safest environment. You'd breathe in these fumes, and you'd have this blue carbon all over your hands and everything. So yeah, it was pretty messy. So that's how I started.
Okay. So what do you think what was probably the next advancement after that?
After that, I mean, overhead projectors existed at that time, but you certainly wouldn't have one to yourself. There'd be one that you could have, maybe in your department, it might have one. So you'd have to borrow it and that as well. I remember at first you had these clear, looked like cellophane sheets, or clear plastic sheets, and you would write out what you wanted to have on them, and you'd put it on the overhead, and it would project onto a screen. And shortly thereafter, they came out with ones that you could put into the photocopier, so you could photocopy something, it would come out
on the
plastic sheet. So that was a big deal, that you could have these permanent overhead sheets.
Got the markers.
Except for writing it out with markers. And usually if you could use, there was erasable markers or there were permanent markers. If you made a mistake with permanent marker, you'd have to go get some of that isopropyl alcohol and try to rub it out. So it wasn't very user friendly. It very, very, very time consuming. As far as access to information, the traditional method of bringing the kids down to the library was about all we had. It was even worse in the rural areas because you couldn't go to your local library really. And let's say if you were studying slavery, for example, you couldn't go to your local library around here and sign out a series of books for the kids to use. Some teachers would go to Moncton, or maybe Fredericton and sign out some from the local library using their own cards. If your library at your school was
there was
fairly
no
well
educator
off,
cards at that point. You had to use your own.
You pretty well had to use your own, and we didn't really do it that much around here because it was so far to get to Moncton or so far to get to Fredericton to use it. And really, you'd bring them to the library to research, but everything is really dated, and your best resource for the most part would be the encyclopedia, which was, by the time it came to print, was already outdated. There would be some source books, but again, everything was pretty dated. So access to current information was tough. We used the newspapers a lot, for current things, and magazines. But to get a full class copy was pretty tricky.
When did you guys start getting computers in the classroom?
That wasn't for a long time. I mean, the internet was invented in 1990. That's when I started teaching, right?
Oh, wow.
So there was no internet before that. And then, you would be able to use it at the computer lab, but everything was dial up, really, really slow. It would take 15 minutes for a picture to load sometime. Or maybe I'm exaggerating, but it would take 5 minutes for a picture to load onto the screen. So it wasn't really that feasible to go that often. And really, most teachers' technology skills weren't up to the point where they would feel comfortable bringing the kids to the computer lab to do research at that time. So I don't recall doing that a whole lot. That was when I first started, and that was in 1990. In 97, they opened the middle school in Rishabukto, and that's when I started teaching grade 6. And we all had our own overhead projectors, so we thought we were in pretty good shape then. Yeah. But still, the methods were still the same. We had a library, but it wasn't very useful. So access to information was pretty tough. Now, I'm not sure exactly when they came out, but I think probably around 2003 or 4, we started to have smart boards appear in the school. I belonged to, at that time, School District 16, which was really at the forefront of technology. We had a very visionary superintendent at the time, Kathy Baldwin, and a very smart business lady as well. So she struck up a deal with Smart Tech, which was the company that made smart boards. And I'm not exactly sure of all the deals that she made, but I know one of the things she did was, for a cut rate on these smart boards, she gave them the use of one of our teachers who was assigned as a tech mentor, one of the first tech mentors. And he went to Smart Tech and trained with them, and then he came back and trained us, but they also used them at seminars around North America to kind of sell the product. So kind of as an exchange for that, she was able to get smart boards at a relatively inexpensive rate. So her goal was to have a smart board in every classroom in District 16, and she achieved that. So every classroom in our old school in Rishabukto had a smart board, and every classroom in the new school that was opened, this is our 5th year, so 2010, every classroom has a smart board. The computer lab has 2 smart boards. The art room has a smart board. There's even one in the room attached to the gymnasium. So you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a smart board.
Yeah.
So really, that was the big change. One of the big changes for me was the use of the smart board.
How does that revolutionize language arts itself? How do you incorporate smart boards specifically with LA in comparison to your social studies courses, for example?
Well, I don't really look at it as 2 different courses for the most part. We do a lot of things interdisciplinary. And basically, I'd be lost without a smart board. All of my files now are electronic and stored on my network, my network drive. I mean, anything that you do, whether it's a lesson, you can hook links right into your smart board lesson. So if you're teaching a lesson on metaphors, let's say similes and metaphors, then you can link to a website about similes and metaphors, and either show them a little video. So I have a highlighter function right on the smart board. So as the kids are working at the desk with a paper copy, we can be talking, and the kids can tell me which ones to underline, which information to underline, so they can, or highlight rather, so they can see it happening. I can model what I want them to do a lot more effectively with a smart board.
So for students specifically with exceptionalities, how do you find that technology has helped with teaching them specifically?
Well, as I was saying before, or started to say before, our district was at the forefront of technology. So there was a project through the Department of Ed a few years ago where they experimented with one-to-one laptop use. So since probably 2006 or 7, the students in our middle school have had a chance to have their own laptop individually. So everything that they do, and their own drive on the network. So everything they do on the computer, they can save. So basically, it's changed the way we've written completely, because there's no such thing as a final copy anymore. So you have what they would consider to be a final draft, but there's always room for editing too, and they can easily edit. So their computer skills are really a lot better than when we first started. Now, for students with exceptionalities, where they have access to the laptop, it depends on the specific need of the child. Sometimes, you can use a text-to-voice software like Kurzweil, or right now, for example, I have a visually impaired student. So she's followed by APSI. So a lot of the texts that we're using have been scanned by them and put on her own laptop, and it shows up in large text. She also has a CCTV machine, which basically blows everything up super large so that she can see it. So, I mean, I guess that's it,
So what changes do you anticipate happening over the course of the next 5 years? So following the trends that we've seen in technology so far.
I really think that over the next 5 years, with the rapid increase of technology and the use of personal devices that are changing so quickly, I don't think that we can stay current as a province. So I really think that we're moving in the bring your own device to school direction. So I really think we're going to see students coming with their own devices. Now that comes with its own set of challenges too, because not everybody's access is the same. So kids with higher socioeconomic backgrounds are going to be able to afford better devices, and where you have some children who would not have any devices at all. So you'd have to try to level that playing field somehow. And I'm not sure how that'll work out, but I really see it going that way. I don't think the province can afford to keep pumping out the technology the way it used to. Like I said, that initiative came through, I think it was during the Bernard Lord era, and was continued in the Sean Graham era. But really, by the time David Alward came around, those programs had dried up. We still have laptops in our school, but it's because of our own school initiatives, not because of the province. And it's just a matter of dollars and cents. The money's just not there to do it anymore. So unless something really drastically changes in the province, I think for us to maintain and to keep going with technology, I think it's going to have to be a bring your own device. Now the other hurdle too is the more technology that you have, the more tech support you need. So you have to hire the technicians that will service the machines. And teachers really need to be adaptive and be able to think on their feet, because you can have a great lesson plan planned that requires the use of the internet, and you can walk in and all of a sudden the internet be down. So you have to always have a plan B and be able to still, like I say, still be able to survive if you're sitting under a tree with your students. So technology is a tool for teaching. It's not a replacement for the teacher in any way. So you still have to manipulate this tool, just like I used to manipulate the Gestetner machines and the overhead projector. They're just tools, and they can't replace a knowledgeable, well-informed and well-educated teacher. So I think that's where I see it going. Kids bringing their own devices to school, teachers bringing their own devices to school, cell phones taking a place in the classroom. There are still rules about kids bringing their cell phones to school, but it's like trying to hold back a tsunami. The cell phones are in the school. You can't stop them. So I think what we need to do is to promote responsible use of them, and to make it a part of our daily teaching.